We have reports from Paris that Diana, Princess of Wales, has been killed in a car accident and that her partner, Dodi Fayed,
30 years after her passing, Princess Diana's legacy is still causing high-stakes friction inside Buckingham Palace. A quiet, behind-closed-doors clash over her upcoming memorial just forced a dramatic power shift. Queen Camilla stood completely isolated after Princess Anne stepped in to back Prince William's unyielding vision. Together, they delivered a decisive ultimatum that changed the palace hierarchy overnight: the vault retrieval at Highgrove. Late on a damp Tuesday evening, a sleek dark sedan pulled through the heavy security gates of Highgrove House. The secluded country estate in Gloucestershire sat quiet under the misty Cotswold sky. Most of the household staff had already turned in for the night. There was no official advance notice sent to the security detail on duty. Princess Anne stepped out from the rear seat, wearing her signature tailored trench coat. Her visit was not recorded on the royal circular calendar. She was not there to see her brother, King Charles. Anne walked with purpose directly toward the administrative wing of the main house. Highgrove serves as a private sanctuary, but it also stores decades of royal family archives. The private holdings moved under new management when Prince William inherited the Duchy of Cornwall. As the current Duke, William holds legal ownership of the property. His aunt was acting under his explicit authority that night. She carried a signed key card and a specific set of security clearance codes. She bypassed the main reception area and headed straight for the lower-level secured storage vaults. These subterranean rooms hold personal ledgers, private correspondence, and unreleased family documents dating back decades. Local security guards stood back as the king's sister cleared the biometric checkpoint without hesitation. Her objective was tucked inside a climate-controlled safe in the rear archives. Inside that safe lay a thick leather-bound folder tied with blue silk ribbon. The contents belonged to Princess Diana before her tragic death in August 1997. For nearly 3 decades, these papers remained undisturbed in private storage. The file contained handwritten notes, personal directives, and private legal wishes regarding her memory and her sons. It also contained an explicit memorandum written by Queen Elizabeth shortly after Diana's funeral. Anne pulled the heavy folder from the shelf and inspected the wax seal. It was completely intact. She placed the file securely inside a leather briefcase, locked it, and walked back out into the night. The entire operation took less than 20 minutes. No phone calls were made to Clarence House. No alerts were sent to senior palace aides. By sunrise, the briefcase was on its way to London. It was delivered directly to William's private office at Kensington Palace. The timing was far from accidental. In less than 48 hours, senior members of the royal household were scheduled to meet for a high-stakes planning summit. The agenda was simple on paper. They needed to outline the official schedule for an upcoming major memorial honoring Diana's lifetime of philanthropic work. But behind the scenes, a major operational war was brewing over who would control the narrative. Queen Camilla had spent months establishing her own patronages and building a steady public presence. Her advisory team wanted to ensure the upcoming summer memorial did not overshadow the current reign. They argued that any large-scale tribute to Diana should remain strictly private, limited to family members and small charitable groups. They proposed a modest service at Windsor Castle with controlled press access. William strongly disagreed. He viewed his mother's legacy as an enduring public trust that belonged to the nation, not a private matter to be minimized. He wanted a grand, high-profile event that highlighted Diana's pioneering work with global charities. To him, cutting back the scale of the tribute felt like a calculated move to quiet her memory. He knew he needed total control over the event structure. To secure that control, he needed legal and historical leverage that nobody could challenge. That was precisely why he asked his aunt to retrieve the Highgrove file. The documents inside that briefcase changed everything. Among the papers was a formal request written by Diana regarding how her personal estate and public memory should be handled. Attached to it was the late Queen's signed approval from 1997. Queen Elizabeth had explicitly granted William and Anne joint administrative oversight over any future official public memorials honoring Diana's name. That single detail was the strategic breakthrough William needed. The document gave him total veto power over palace planning committees. It legally separated the memorial planning from standard household operations. Neither the current press office nor Clarence House aides could rewrite the itinerary without his written consent. Anne's involvement brought immense weight to the situation. Within the royal family, the Princess Royal is widely respected for her ironclad discipline and unwavering dedication to duty. She rarely gets involved in personal family disputes. Her decision to personally travel to Tetbury in the middle of the night sent a shockwave through the upper ranks of palace management. When word reached senior staff that Anne had retrieved the archival file, panic spread among Camilla's inner circle. They realized William was no longer just making an emotional plea for his mother's memory. He was mounting a coordinated, legally backed campaign alongside the most formidable member of the royal family. Anne had always maintained a quiet, professional distance from media drama, but her loyalty to her late mother's binding decrees was absolute. Queen Elizabeth had trusted her to safeguard family agreements, and Anne intended to carry out that responsibility without compromise. She saw William's request not as an act of rebellion, but as a duty to honor an established royal contract. The stage was now set for an extraordinary confrontation. Armed with the retrieved archive, William had the exact tool required to dictate terms. The planning summit at St. James's Palace was no longer going to be a casual discussion about event logistics. It was turning into a direct test of authority between the heir to the throne and the sitting Queen's advisory team. As morning broke over the capital, palace couriers delivered the updated meeting agenda to all key participants. Attached to the front page was a short, formal notice stamped with the seal of the Princess Royal. It informed the committee that all previous drafts of the memorial schedule were officially void. A new framework had been established, and it would be presented directly by Prince William. The message was crystal clear to everyone who read it. The battle over Diana's memory was about to be fought on William's terms, and he held all the winning cards. Before the administrative staff could even draft a response, a phone call came through from the Lord Chamberlain. The meeting time had been moved up. The core players were ordered to assemble in the private briefing room by mid-afternoon. Camilla's team scrambled to prepare a counter-strategy, but their options were rapidly narrowing. They had planned to use standard palace protocol to limit the scope of the tribute. Now, faced with a binding historic agreement backed by Anne, those standard protocols were completely useless. The atmosphere inside the corridors of power grew increasingly tense. Staff members moved quickly between offices, whispering about the unexpected alliance between William and his aunt. Nobody had anticipated that Anne would take such a direct, decisive role in the dispute. For Camilla, this was shaping up to be her most challenging day since entering the royal household. She was about to walk into a room where her authority as queen consort would be directly challenged by the future king, backed by the late queen's most trusted daughter. The quiet halls of the palace held an uneasy silence as the hour of the summit drew near. A closed-door meeting at St. James's Palace. At precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, heavy oak doors swung shut in the entree room of St. James's Palace. Rain tapped lightly against the tall, multi-paned windows overlooking the cobbled courtyard below. Around a polished mahogany table sat 4 people: Prince William, Queen Camilla, Sir Clive Alderton, and Princess Anne. On the table rested a single black leather binder marked with the Kensington Palace crest. Beside it lay the blue ribboned file retrieved from Gloucestershire the night before. No tea was poured, no pleasantries were exchanged. William opened the binder and slid a 2-page document across the table. It was the revised draft for the summer memorial. Under the proposed schedule, the central memorial service would take place at Westminster Abbey. The event was scheduled to be broadcast live globally. Over 50 international charities associated with Diana were listed as key participants. Camilla picked up the paper and scanned the lines. Her eyes stopped at the bottom of the second page. Under the official order of service, her name was entirely absent from the list of speakers. The original plan drafted by Clarence House had allotted her a 10-minute address focusing on modern royal patronages. William's revised schedule reassigned that time slot to Diana's brother, Charles Spencer. The change was deliberate. It removed Camilla from the public podium completely, placing her in a seated position alongside standard guests. Camilla placed the document back on the table. She turned to Sir Clive, her private secretary, who immediately raised an objection. He pointed out that excluding the sitting queen consort from a major state-level gathering broke with standard protocol established in 2022. He argued that public perception would split, creating damaging headlines about institutional division. William did not raise his voice. He reached over and tapped the blue-ribboned file. He referenced the signed 1997 Accord. That document designated control of Diana's public memory strictly to her immediate bloodline and appointed executors. He stated flatly that the memorial was an act of filial duty, not a crown administration event. Camilla countered with a direct warning. She stated that if the schedule remained unchanged, she would pull out of her scheduled public appearances for the entire upcoming week. That threat included a high-profile service at St. George's Chapel, where she was slated to represent the monarchy alongside King Charles. Her absence would trigger immediate public speculation. The press would instantly spot the gap in the royal diary. For a royal family already managing health challenges and reduced working members, a high-profile boycott by the Queen Consort would create an immediate crisis. Sir Clive supported her stance, suggesting a compromise. He proposed that Camilla deliver a brief introductory tribute before William took the stage. That way, the current reign would maintain its ceremonial authority while allowing William his personal moment. William refused the compromise on the spot. He insisted that mixing current crown PR with his mother's historic tribute diluted the purpose of the gathering. The room fell completely silent. All eyes turned to the head of the table, where Princess Anne sat listening quietly. For 45 minutes, the conversation circled without progress. Camilla argued that the public wanted to see a unified royal front. William maintained that honoring his mother required complete historical honesty, not manufactured unity. Outside the room, senior press officers waited nervously in the hallway. They needed an approved press release draft before the 4 o'clock media deadline. If no agreement was reached, the palace communications team would have to issue a temporary hold notice, fueling fresh media rumors. The tension reached its peak when Sir Clive suggested bringing King Charles into the room to overrule the revised draft. He argued that as sovereign, Charles held final authority over all royal events taking place in state venues like Westminster Abbey. That was the moment Princess Anne spoke up. She reached over, pulled the folder toward her, and opened it to page 3. She read aloud a specific clause written by Queen Elizabeth herself. The clause stated that decisions regarding public memorials for Diana were permanently delegated to the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal, immune from sovereign override. The room went dead silent. Sir Clive checked the signature on the page. It was authentic, witnessed by former private secretaries at Balmoral Castle. Camilla realized her tactical leverage was gone. Appealing to Charles would accomplish nothing except forcing the king into a public disagreement with his sister and his heir. The legal structure left no room for palace maneuvering. Camilla stood up, gathered her papers, and left the entree room without another word. Sir Clive followed her down the long gallery toward the garden entrance. 10 minutes later, word filtered through the palace channels. Camilla had officially canceled her appearance at St. George's Chapel, citing sudden fatigue. The press team scrambled to publish the standard official statement to cover the unexpected change in schedule. While the press office managed the immediate fallout, William and Anne remained in the briefing room. They had secured full control over the memorial structure, but the victory came with immediate operational complications. With Camilla stepping back, the entire public focus shifted squarely onto William. Every detail of the upcoming ceremony would now be scrutinized by global media. Any misstep would be framed as a direct reflection on his ability to manage major state-level events. Furthermore, King Charles was now caught directly in the middle. He had to balance his devotion to his wife with his duty to support his heir and sister. His private office needed to decide whether to attend the Westminster service under William's strict conditions or find a neutral path out. William gathered his papers and placed them back inside the black binder. He turned to his aunt and thanked her for her support. Anne simply nodded, advising him to ensure the remaining logistics were executed flawlessly. As William stepped out into the palace courtyard, his car was already waiting. He had won the first round of the confrontation, but the harder task lay ahead. He needed to execute a global memorial that satisfied public expectations while keeping the internal fractures of the monarchy from spilling into open view. His phone buzzed with an incoming message from Kensington Palace. His staff had received the updated guest list from the Spencer family estate in Northamptonshire. The family had approved the revised schedule without edits. The momentum was now entirely on William's side. Yet, a key question remained unanswered. How would King Charles react when he officially reviewed the final itinerary at Clarence House later that evening? The king held the power to grant or deny the use of specific royal heraldic assets for the service. Without those assets, the memorial would lose its formal state character. The next 24 hours would determine whether Charles backed his family's historic pledge or stood by his queen consort. Princess Anne breaks the royal neutrality. At 9 o'clock the following morning, a dark maroon royal courier vehicle pulled up to the rear entrance of Clarence House. A lone royal protection officer delivered an official red leather dispatch box directly to the king's private secretary. Inside sat the formal press release for St. George's Chapel. The official reason given for Queen Camilla's absence was seasonal fatigue and schedule restructuring. By 10 o'clock, that official statement hit newswires around the world. Royal correspondents immediately questioned the sudden cancellation. The Queen Consort had attended a public reception just 24 hours earlier in perfectly good health. The palace press team refused to answer follow-up questions, deepening the suspicion among veteran royal watchers. Behind closed doors, the real story was already spreading through the senior ranks of the household. Camilla's absence was a direct protest. She refused to sit on the sidelines of a major public event, while Prince William dictated terms from St. James's Palace. Normally, when family disagreements reach this level, Princess Anne steps back. The Princess Royal has built a reputation over 50 years for remaining fiercely neutral in internal disputes. She focuses strictly on her official engagements, routinely completing over 400 public appearances a year. She avoids palace politics, media strategy, and personal rivalries. This time, Anne broke her own long-standing rule. At 11 o'clock, she arrived at Clarence House for a pre-scheduled meeting with her brother, King Charles. She walked into the private study carrying a thin blue folder. She did not attempt to soften the blow. She laid out the reality of the situation in plain terms. Anne reminded the king of the promises made to Princess Diana's estate back in 1997. She made it clear that Prince William's position was not a personal attack on Camilla. It was the fulfillment of an established family duty. She told Charles directly that undermining William on this issue would permanently damage his relationship with his heir. Her intervention completely changed the dynamic. Charles had been preparing to broker a middle ground settlement that would restore Camilla's speaking role. He wanted to protect his wife's public standing and avoid media rumors of a palace feud. But facing his sister's unyielding stance, he realized that middle ground no longer existed. Anne's authority inside the family is absolute. She is the late Queen Elizabeth's eldest daughter and the most trusted advisor among the senior royals. When Anne speaks on matters of institutional duty, the family listens. Her support effectively gave William total operational authority over the memorial planning. By early afternoon, Clarence House issued an internal directive to all communications staff. The official instructions were clear. No alternative statements were to be drafted. The event framework presented by William was to be processed without further alterations. Camilla's inner circle realized they had lost the tactical battle. Their attempt to use a public boycott as leverage had backfired. Instead of forcing William to negotiate, it isolated Camilla even further from the central planning process. However, resolving the speaking schedule created an immediate new complication. The planning team still needed to select a central historical feature for the Westminster Abbey service. William wanted something tangible, an authentic piece of Diana's personal story that would anchor the entire tribute. Standard exhibition items like dresses or portraits were quickly dismissed by the committee as too commercial. William wanted a personal artifact, something that reflected her private character rather than her public image. That search led directly back to Highgrove House. Deep inside the private estate archives sat a sealed collection of personal items that had not been opened since 2002. Among those items was a specific personal heirloom that Diana had kept with her until her final months in London. Accessing that specific vault required explicit authorization from both William and Anne. The items inside were subject to strict privacy agreements signed decades ago. As the sun began to set over Kensington Palace, William placed a direct call to the estate manager in Gloucestershire. he ordered the vault unlocked and the specific archive container brought under heavy escort to London. The contents of that container remained a closely guarded secret even from senior palace aides. Only William, Anne, and the estate archivist knew what was being brought to the capital. The mystery surrounding the object immediately set off fresh speculation among the small group of staff managing the event logistics. Why was this particular item so vital to William's vision for the memorial? And why had it been kept hidden away from the public eye for over 20 years? The answers lay inside a locked velvet case currently making its way along the M4 motorway toward the capital. As the transport vehicle approached London, William prepared to reveal the final piece of his tribute, setting the stage for a dramatic moment that would redefine how the royal family honored its most famous icon, the unlocking of Spencer legacy assets. At 11 o'clock on Thursday morning, an unmarked armored van pulled up to the private courtyard at Kensington Palace. Two security officers unloaded a heavy, dark oak box bound with brass fittings. The container had just arrived from the Highgrove private repository under police escort. Inside Prince William's private office, the box was placed on a central table. Princess Anne stood nearby alongside two senior archival conservators from the Royal Collection Trust. When the conservators lifted the heavy lid, they revealed a collection of personal items untouched since 2002. Placed neatly on top was a bound, leather-backed notebook written in dark blue ink. It was Princess Diana's private journal on family duty and public life, dating back to 1995. The journal contained explicit personal notes on how she wanted her charitable efforts carried forward by her sons. Attached to the final entry was a handwritten instruction regarding her personal crest and the emblem of the Spencer family line. She had explicitly requested that her personal symbols be integrated alongside the royal coat of arms at any formal state memorial held in her name. This was the missing artifact William needed to complete the event structure. For months, palace protocol officers had insisted that official state rules prevented the blending of royal heraldry with non-royal family emblems at Westminster Abbey. They argued that standard royal guidelines must strictly apply, leaving Diana's personal family history on the margins. The discovery of the 1995 journal entry destroyed that argument instantly. The document provided direct evidence of Diana's personal wishes, backed by her own handwritten legal requests. By early afternoon, William sent a high-resolution scan of the journal entry directly to the College of Arms. The official heraldic authority for the United Kingdom reviewed the text alongside the original 1997 accord. Within 2 hours, the Kings of Arms issued a formal determination. The Spencer crest was officially cleared for prominent display alongside the royal arms during the service. This decision marked a massive victory for William. It ensured that the memorial would not just be a standard crown event, but a true reflection of his mother's personal identity. However, displaying the Spencer crest presented a sharp challenge to Queen Camilla's advisory team. The formal approval of Diana's personal emblems highlighted her enduring status as a primary historical figure in royal history. It drew a clear line between the current Crown administration and the personal legacy of the late Princess of Wales. At Clarence House, news of the heraldic decision caused immediate tension. Senior aides realized that William had successfully bypassed standard palace committees entirely by relying on independent legal and heraldic authorities. Sir Clive Alderton called an emergency meeting with communications officers to evaluate the fallout. They recognized that public attention would focus heavily on the inclusion of the Spencer crest, raising fresh questions about Camilla's absence from the proceedings. Camilla remained firmly at her country residence in Wiltshire. She maintained her decision to skip the upcoming public appearances, refusing to participate in an event where her role had been systematically stripped away. Yet, as the operational plan fell into place, William faced a final, critical hurdle. The physical program for the service was fully locked, but the official press notice still required formal clearance from the Palace Communications Secretariat. Under standard operating procedures, all major public announcements involving state venues must carry the joint approval of both Buckingham Palace and Clarence House. At 4 o'clock, a draft of the press release was transmitted to the Central Press Office. Attached to the file was a strict instruction from William's private secretary. The text was to be published without edits by 5 o'clock. Within minutes, an emergency hold was placed on the file by Clarence House representatives. They demanded a 2-hour delay to review the wording, hoping to insert a clause that explained Camilla's absence in more diplomatic terms. The delay threatened to ignite an immediate media frenzy. News outlets in London were already tipped off that a major announcement was imminent. Any last-minute hold would lead to intense speculation about a renewed internal power struggle. Standing in his office, William looked at the clock. The deadline was fast approaching, and the communications team was caught in an absolute stalemate between two rival household directives. He picked up his desk phone and placed a direct, unrecorded call to the head of Central Communications. He was about to deliver a short, decisive command that would settle the press standoff once and for all. Camilla's isolation at Ray Mill House. At precisely 4:20 p.m., a black phone on the wall of the Central Communications desk began to ring. The senior duty press officer picked it up on the second ring. On the line was Prince William, speaking directly from his desk at Kensington Palace. He did not ask for a manager. He did not engage in small talk. He delivered a 7-word command. The program stands exactly as we have written it. The duty officer noted the order, ended the call, and bypassed the hold request from Clarence House. At 4:45 p.m., the official statement went live on the royal family website. The document confirmed the complete order of service for the Westminster Abbey Memorial. It featured the prominent inclusion of the Spencer family crest alongside the royal coat of arms. It listed the speech by Charles Spencer. It confirmed Princess Anne's attendance as patron, and, just as William intended, the name of Queen Camilla was absent from the official schedule. 100 miles away, in the quiet countryside of Wiltshire, Camilla sat in the drawing room of Ray Mill House. She had purchased the private stone manor back in 1995 following her divorce. It remains her personal property, entirely independent of Crown estates. Outside her window, rain fell heavily across the lawn. Her personal staff moved quietly through the corridors, carefully avoiding the main sitting room. On her table lay a printout of the newly released press schedule. For the first time since the coronation, Camilla found herself completely cut off from the operational machinery of the monarchy. Her private press team at Clarence House had tried to intervene and failed. Her attempt to leverage her absence had been met with complete indifference by the future king. She picked up her phone and called King Charles, who was staying at Highgrove House. The conversation was brief. Charles refused to override William's release. He told her plainly that Princess Anne had presented the 1997 Accord, signed by the late Queen Elizabeth. The legal framework left no room for sovereign intervention. Attempting to force a change would ignite a public constitutional argument inside the family. The realization hit Camilla hard. Her standing inside the royal operational hierarchy depended entirely on the support of her husband. But when faced with a binding historic agreement backed by Anne and William, even the king was unwilling to step in. By 6 o'clock, news channels across London began analyzing the official press release. Veteran commentators quickly picked up on the strategic shift. They highlighted how William had successfully preserved his mother's personal identity at the heart of a major state venue. At the same time, royal reporters noted the sudden quiet coming from Camilla's office. The usual background briefings provided to friendly correspondents had completely stopped. Inside Ray Mill House, Camilla's advisors scrambled to manage the immediate narrative. They realized that staying silent for too long would look like a total surrender. They needed a way to explain her detachment from the event without publicly confirming a rift. Sir Clive Alderton suggested issuing a separate, private statement from Ray Mill House, highlighting her personal charitable commitments elsewhere in the country on the day of the memorial. Camilla reviewed the draft and rejected it. She knew a secondary press release would look reactive and weak. Instead, she chose to remain silent, effectively isolating herself from the public dialogue entirely. While Camilla remained withdrawn in Wiltshire, William was already moving on to the final stage of event preparation. At 7 o'clock that evening, he held a private conference call with the Dean of Westminster. They finalized the seating arrangements inside the transepts of the Abbey. Every seat in the front row was assigned directly to members of Diana's immediate family, key charity directors, and long-standing personal friends. The entire venue was structured to center on Diana's living legacy, completely detached from current court politics. By 8 o'clock, a secondary crisis began to develop inside the Royal Logistics Division. While the program was locked and the press release was public, the physical security logistics for the event required the formal signature of the Home Office. Under standard government protocol, state-level security coverage for royal events must be signed off by the sitting monarch's private secretary. The paperwork had been sitting on Sir Clive's desk since noon. Without his signature, the Metropolitan Police could not deploy the specialized motorcade units or clear the perimeter around the Abbey. At 8:30 p.m., William's team dispatched an urgent courier from Kensington Palace directly to Clarence House. The message was straightforward. If the security release was not signed by 9 p.m., William would personally contact the Home Secretary to request an emergency executive override. The move placed Sir Clive in an impossible position. Withholding his signature would expose Clarence House to charges of actively undermining a major security operation for a state-level gathering. Sir Clive called Ray Millhouse one last time. Camilla did not answer the call. Sensing that the battle was completely lost, Sir Clive retrieved the document from his desk, signed the authorization page, and handed it to the waiting courier. The final administrative barrier fell away. By 9:15 p.m., the Home Office confirmed that full security protocols were activated. The perimeter around Westminster Abbey was officially secured, and the operational plans were locked in place. Inside his private office, William reviewed the final confirmation receipts. Every detail had been executed according to his plan. The historical integrity of his mother's legacy was protected, backed by the full authority of the state and the late monarch's binding accord. Yet, as night settled over London, a deeper question hung over the royal household. William had proven that he possessed the strategic resolve and legal leverage to dictate terms to the current court. He had established a precedent that would define his future reign. But the open fracture between Kensington Palace and Clarence House remained unhealed. How would King Charles navigate the diplomatic fallout during the morning briefing at Buckingham Palace? And what would happen when Prince William, Princess Anne, and King Charles finally stood side by side in the nave of Westminster Abbey? The final compromise and power shift. At 8 o'clock on Friday morning, a fleet of black state sedans pulled into the private inner courtyard of Buckingham Palace. Rain slicked the stone cobblestones under a gray Capitol sky. King Charles stepped out first, followed closely by Princess Anne. Prince William arrived 2 minutes later from Kensington Palace. The three senior royals walked straight up the grand staircase to the sovereign's guard chamber. There was no royal entourage present. The private secretaries, press aides, and household staff remained waiting on the ground floor. On a long mahogany table sat the final leather-bound program for the Westminster Abbey Memorial. Next to it lay the signed Home Office security clearances and the approved heraldic layouts featuring the Spencer family crest. Charles sat down at the head of the table. He put on his reading glasses and picked up the completed document. For 10 full minutes, he reviewed every single page without speaking. The silence inside the room was heavy. This was the moment where the king had to make a definitive choice. He could attempt to demand last-minute edits to soften Queen Camilla's absence, or he could sign off on his son's unyielding design. William stood by the high window, looking out over the palace gardens. Anne sat opposite her brother, hands rested neatly in her lap. Neither offered any further arguments. The legal and historical evidence had already been presented. The decision now rested entirely on the sovereign's desk. Charles reached the final page of the Order of Service. He looked up at William, then turned his gaze toward Anne. He took a fountain pen from his jacket pocket, unclipped the cap, and signed his name at the bottom of the formal royal authorization page. He did not alter a single line of text. The king chose institutional stability and historical obligation over personal preference. Trying to shield Camilla against a binding accord would inflict permanent damage on the monarchy's credibility. With that single signature, the battle over Princess Diana's legacy was officially over. William had secured absolute victory for his mother's memory, entirely on his own terms. Charles closed the binder and pushed it across the table toward his son. He stood up, walked over to William, and placed a hand on his shoulder. The gesture was brief, but it signaled a massive, quiet shift in the internal dynamic of the royal household. William took the signed binder and handed it directly to Anne, who placed it safely inside her briefcase for delivery to the Central Archives. By 10 o'clock, the Palace Press Secretariat received the green light to distribute the finalized, sovereign-approved itinerary to international news organizations. The global media reaction was immediate. Broadcasters around the world praised the comprehensive scale of the tribute and the prominent inclusion of Diana's family heritage. In Wiltshire, Camilla received a brief phone call confirming that the king had signed off on the schedule without changes. She accepted the outcome in total silence, remaining at Ray Mill House while the rest of the family prepared for the public service. The entire episode revealed a stark new reality within the British monarchy. William had demonstrated a level of strategic resolve and authority that caught palace traditionalists completely off guard. By aligning with Anne, he proved that he possessed both the legal knowledge and the political willpower to enforce his vision for the crown's future. The operational balance of power inside the royal family had fundamentally shifted. The future king was no longer just taking direction from the court. He was actively shaping its direction, protecting his maternal heritage, and setting the tone for his eventual reign. As the morning meeting concluded, Charles, Anne, and William walked out of the sovereign's guard chamber together. They descended the grand staircase to join their waiting vehicles. In less than 3 weeks, the doors of Westminster Abbey would open to welcome thousands of guests for the historic tribute. The program was set, the security was locked, and the legacy of Princess Diana was secured, just as she had wished. Yet, as the royal motorcade departed the palace gates, staff members quietly pondered what this watershed moment meant for the years ahead. When the time comes for Prince William to take the throne, how will this decisive display of power influence his relationships with the rest of the firm? The dynamics inside the royal household are shifting faster than ever before. Princess Anne and Prince William have shown that when it comes to honoring Princess Diana's legacy, the firm moves with absolute conviction. Do you think King Charles made the right decision by backing his son and sister over Queen Camilla? Or was Camilla treated unfairly during this high-stakes planning process? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into palace strategy insightful, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more detailed breakdowns of the British royal family.